Hello everybody and welcome back to Operation Logistics, where I forgot to start up the audio. There we go. Excellent. Okay, so we are currently doing this switch statement where we are trying to set up inter-hex adjacency here in this neighbors. So in order to do this, we've already determined that we're in 10, 15, 21, 26, 32, or 37. So it's one of those for sure. So let's go ahead and set up a few cases. Case 10, break. Case 15, break. Case 21, break. Case 26, break. Case 32, break. And case 37, break. Okay, so now we need to determine which connects to which. And then we need to determine how we get there. Like, how do we change world hexes if necessary and biome hexes if necessary? Well, that's going to be a more difficult problem, to be sure. But we've got this here to... I'm actually just, for the moment, going to hide the biome hexes so that we can see just the building hexes. The biome hexes are laid out the same way as the building hexes. So we would need to determine if it's a border hex. The easiest way to do that would be to look at the adjacencies. And then we'd need to determine which... We'd need to determine which biome hex we're going into. Do the biome hexes have adjacencies? Ah, they do not. Okay. Or we may have to set that up. Then again, we may not. I'm just thinking here about how I want to implement this. The biome hexes and the world hexes may both need adjacencies. If they do, we'd probably set them up the same way. But for right now, we can go ahead and say... I mean, it's kind of set up randomly, right? Let's see here. We do not currently have the building hexes active, do we? Biome hexes.position equals subhex manager dot subhexes I dot transform dot position down here. And then we turn off the biome hexes here. Okay. Well, the other option is that we would need to get a position, potentially, from an int3. And the question is, how would we go about doing that? Well, because this is what I'm thinking right now. Okay, so we've got our biome hexes here, right? We've got our building hexes here. I'm going to go ahead and elevate this up. No, I don't want to open the Unity documentation. Go away. I'm going to go ahead and elevate this up to, like... Oh, wait. Y up. 1 is way too much. 0.1 will do for right now, I guess. I'm just going to go ahead and drop that right on down to about there. That'll do. Okay, so hypothetically, say we're looking at map hex 15 here. Well, that's going to connect up with map hex... what one is it? This one, map hex 32. Except it's going to connect up over here. So, we don't actually know the position of this, because this can move around depending on what hex you're in, right? So what we need to do is we need to, I think, go into our hex manager, and we need to go ahead and implement ourselves a public vector3 get building hex position int3 hex. Okay, so that'll get us what... this is going to take an int3 in and give us back an estimated position. Now this position will be pretty accurate, most likely. We can estimate this pretty easily, right? By taking the local position of these things. Yeah, I think that'll work. So what we need to do is we need to say vector3 position equals, and then we need to do get world hex by index, and then we'll pass in hex.worldhex.transform.position. Like so. Okay, now we don't have a way to get the biome hex, as in not the hex store, just the biome hex. That's a bit of a problem, right? It is. Let's go ahead and rename this to get hex store by index. Okay. And then let's implement ourselves a new public biome hex, get biome hex by index, and we will pass in the int world hex index and the int biome hex index. Okay. And then we will go ahead and say biome hex equals, and this is going to be get world hex by index, world hex index, dot subhex manager dot subhexes indices dot, or not indices, I already passed in indices down here, I'm copying off of this. This is biome hex index. Biome hex index dot, actually we just return that. Return hex. Okay, like that. Okay, so then we say position down here in get building hex position plus equals get biome hex by index hex dot biome hex dot transform dot local position. We want this to be relative to this. What is this freaking out about? Oh, there needs to be two here, of course. So the biome hex dot... this'll... Yeah, I mean, this is fine. It's not truly necessary to go this far, but hex.worldHex will... It's fine. Because the thing is, we're getting the we're getting the object, not the instance, I guess you could say. Because we're getting the one that already exists, we're not instantiating anything new. So we technically don't need to pass in the world hex. We can grab it from any instance of the sub-subhexes. Or rather, of the subhexes. But it's fine. This'll do. So then we need to go ahead and add in again get building hex by index. And this will pass in the hex dot transform dot local position again. And then we would just return position. And that gets us not necessarily exactly the correct position, but a really, really close approximation of it. Because let's see here. I'm assuming that takes into account the scale. I hope that takes into account the scale. Position of the transform relative to the parent transform. I think that takes into account the scale, but I don't know that for sure. So, with that being the case, then we should fairly easily be able to hop into our... where was that? Was that the Hex Manager that we were doing that in? This is the Hex Manager. Where was that switch statement? I think that was actually in World Hex. Yes. Yes, it was. Okay. So we now have an estimate of the position of the building hex, and I do want to just verify that that's working. So, let's go ahead and, for case 10 only, go ahead and say something along the lines of... we are going to be looking at specifically this one for right now. And basically what we want to do is we want to do a physics.overlap sphere at this position. And we don't need it to be very big, do we? We only need it to be, like, realistically, maybe 0.25? And we'll see how many things that returns. So when we set up the neighbors, we do a similar sort of overlap sphere. And I believe that was done in the building hex itself. Grab neighbors, yes. Okay, so this is how we grabbed it here. I'm just going to copy that and paste this in up here. We're going to do this outside of the switch statement here. So collider colliders, colliders equals physics.overlap sphere. We may not actually need the switch statement, but that's fine. We already have an I, of course, so for now we're going to go ahead and use J. Okay. So, if colliders j.gameObject equals this.gameObject, that's not what we're looking to do. That's certainly not what we're looking to do. So we're going to go ahead and delete this right now, and we're going to say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and bump this up to 0.25f, and we're going to see just how many things that returns. And for right now, I think we don't actually need this switch statement. I think we're going to be grabbing this in a slightly better fashion. So, realistically, the question is, if we're over here, will that grab the next world hex? Not convinced it will. How far would we have to move one of these? Let's go ahead and pull this out of the parenting and determine how far this actually is. 0.7 and 0.4. Okay, so let's pull open a calculator quick. And 0.7. And let's go ahead and square that. And add in 0.4 squared. And then take the square root of that. About 0.8. Okay. Good to know. So the distance there is about 0.8. Which means that if we do a physics.overlap sphere of 1, we're very likely to grab everything here. Is that okay? It might be okay. I mean, this is going to be a lot of things that it's doing, though, is what we need to figure right now. This adjacency is going to be very, very, very slow. We could maybe go about hard coding it. Well, if it equals building hex, let's go ahead and make sure to move that back in. So if it equals sub hex, We can definitely continue. This is fine. We don't care about any sub-hexes. So let's go ahead and switch that over. And then we will go ahead and say something along the lines of... Yeah, I mean, that's just going to be so big. Maybe we should narrow this down. Back down to the 0. What was it exactly? 0.01f. And then rather than doing overlap sphere, we could do sphere cast. And then this is origin and direction, right? Yeah, we need to have a direction for that, which isn't really helpful either. So the overlap sphere is going to be perhaps not amazingly useful here. Because we want to grab the nearest one that is not this one, essentially. And actually, looking at this, are these going to be closer to their center point or to this center point? They're going to be closer to their center point slightly, so we'll have to run that check. But yeah, actually, we can grab that way. And if that distance is greater than a certain amount, which would be essentially distance between these. So if the distance from here to here, for example, is greater than the distance from here to here, then that would allow us to know that this is on the wrong side. And therefore we need to go for a world hex instead. Yeah, okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and put a cut in here, and next episode we'll continue trying to wrap our heads around this one. See you all then.